The hallway feels too narrow suddenly, like the walls have leaned in to listen. Marcus is still holding his keycard between two fingers, tapping it lightly against his thigh the way he used to tap his pencil in geometry when he was thinking. Some habits survive everything. Yeah, I say, my voice quieter than I mean it to be. Astronomical. He smiles again, smaller this time, almost shy. The kind of smile that doesn't reach magazine covers or boardrooms. The one I used to catch when he thought no one was looking. Room 1847. He reads off the little paper sleeve, then glances at my key. Wait, you're not. I hold mine up. Same number. Same floor. Same everything. The receptionist's voice floats back into my memory. Best views in the hotel. Actually, Marcus exhales a soft laugh, disbelieving. They double booked us. Looks that way. For a moment, we just stand there. Two grown men in expensive suits, holding identical keys to a room that only has one bed. The universe, apparently, has a sense of humor darker than I ever gave it credit for. I can go back down, I say quickly. Tell them there's been a mistake.
Oh, he says too fast.
Then softer, no. I mean, we're adults. We can share a room for a few nights. It's not like we're 18 anymore, says it lightly, but something flickers across his face when he mentions 18. Something quick and gone. I nod, because what else is there? Sure, yeah, we'll manage. The elevator ride to the 18th floor is silent, except for the soft ding of passing floors. We don't look at each other. We don't need to. I can feel him standing 2 feet away like he's taking up the entire car. Room 1847 is ridiculous. Floor 2 ceiling windows overlooking the river. Lights glittering like spilled diamonds. One king bed, dressed in white linens so crisp they look unreal. A sleek sofa that definitely wasn't built for sleeping. A single desk. One armchair. Everything designed for one person, who occasionally brings someone else. Home, Marcus drops his bag by the dresser and stares at the bed like it's a math problem he's not. Sure, he wants to solve. I'll take the couch. I say, don't be stupid. It's a king. We're not teenagers at church camp. He rubs the back of his neck. Unless you're uncomfortable with you. In a bed, after 11 years of dreaming about exactly this and waking up hollow every time. I'm not uncomfortable, I lie. He nods, accepting it. Architects are good at accepting structural limitations. We unpack in silence. I hang my suits with military precision. He tosses his clothes into drawers like he's never feared wrinkles in his life. When he pulls out a worn Lincoln High t-shirt to sleep in, faded red with the old mascot, something in my chest cracks open. You kept that? I ask before I can stop myself. He looks down at the shirt in his hands. Jason hates it. Says it's ratty. I told him it's vintage. A pause. I wore it the night we won state senior year. Thought it was lucky. I remember that night. I was in the stands sketching the stadium lights while everyone else screamed. He scored the winning goal. I still have the drawing somewhere. He disappears into the bathroom to change. I sit on the edge of the bed and try not to think about how many times I imagined him in a room like this with me. Never like this, though. Never with wedding rings, and 11 years in lives built carefully in opposite directions. When he comes out, the t-shirt clings to his shoulders in a way that feels illegal. He's filled out in all the ways I used to trace with my eyes in high school. He catches me looking, and I glance away too fast. You okay? He asks, voice low. Jet lag, I say. Another lie. He climbs into bed on the left side, same as he always sat on the left side of the lab table we shared junior year. Some things are muscle memory. The lights go off. The city glows beyond the windows. I lie on my back, hands folded over my stomach like a corpse, staring at the ceiling. Minutes pass. Or hours. Time feels negotiable in the dark. David, he says suddenly, so quietly I almost think I imagined it. Yeah. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been such a coward back then? My heart stops. Actually stops. I count to 5 before it remembers how to beat. Every day I say, the truth tastes like blood. He's quiet for so long I think that's it. The confession in the end. Then the mattress shifts. His hand finds mine under the covers, fingers sliding between mine like they were built to fit there. His palm is warm, calloused in new places. Real. I'm not asking for anything, he whispers. I just needed you to know. I see you, David. I always saw you. I was just terrified. I turned my head on the pillow. In the half-light from the city, his eyes are shining. I'm not terrified anymore, he says. His thumb traces the inside of my wrist, slow circles like he's sketching foundations, like he's testing whether the ground will hold. I think about Jason waiting at home, about the life Marcus built, about the one I didn't because some part of me was always standing in that high school hallway waiting for him to turn around. I think about the odds of this room, this bed, this moment. Then I turn my hand over and lace our fingers together. Me neither, I say. Outside. The river keeps moving. Inside, two boys who never quite grew out of each other hold on in the dark. Like maybe the universe got the story wrong the first time. And maybe, just maybe, it's finally ready to let us write the second draft. I thought 10 years would be enough insulation. 10 years, 2,000 miles, one divorce mine, one marriage his, and the quiet, deliberate construction of an adult life that no longer flinched at the mention of his name. I was wrong. The corridor on the 23rd floor of the St. Regis Singapore was carpeted in deep indigo, lit by low amber sconces that made everyone look slightly more expensive than they were. I was rolling my suitcase toward 2308 when I saw him. Elliot. He had the same posture he'd had at 19. Shoulders a fraction too straight, as though someone long ago told him slouching was unbecoming and he'd decided to obey forever. His hair was shorter now, salted at the temples. But the way he held his phone to his ear, thumb, and middle finger, never the pinky, was identical. He was speaking Mandarin, low and rapid, the language he only ever used with his mother. I caught the tail end of a sentence that sounded like an apology. He ended the call, slipped the phone into the breast pocket of a midnight blue suit, and looked up. The years collapsed. Leo. His voice hadn't changed either. Still that ridiculous half-octave drop on my name like he was tasting it. Elliot. I managed not to squeak. Barely. He smiled the way people do when they're calculating how much time politeness requires. What are the odds? It's astronomical, apparently. He glanced at the brass plaque on the door. Behind him, 2308. I looked down at the sleeve in my hand. 2308. Of course, we both turned toward the sound of hurried footsteps. It's the duty manager, a young woman whose badge read Celine, was practically jogging toward us. Tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. I am so sorry, Mr. Hartono, Doctor. There was a system migration last night, our new reservation platform, and it duplicated the only corner suite on this floor. We didn't catch it until both keycards had already been programmed. Elliot raised an eyebrow. So we're roommates? Technically, yes. Temporarily, we're fully committed tonight. There's a cardiothorax symposium, a destination wedding with 180 guests, and the ASEAN FinTech Summit. The only thing I can offer one of you is a Garden View King on 12, or... She tapped, winced. We do have 2310 available, the sister suite, connecting door. I laughed before I could stop myself, a short, sharp sound that belonged to someone much younger. Elliot looked at me, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Next door is fine, he said. Celine looked relieved enough to cry. I'll comp both stays naturally, and dinner, and the minibar. And we'll manage, I said. Because what else do you say when the universe books you adjoining rooms with the only person you ever loved hard enough to break yourself over? I had loved Elliot Way the way hurricanes love coastlines, completely, destructively, without permission. He had been the senior piano prodigy home from Curtis for winter break. I had been the scholarship sophomore who restocked sheet music in the conservatory library because it meant I could watch him practice. He never noticed me until the night. I found him crying over Supan in the dark practice room because his father had called his playing sentimental garbage. I sat beside him on the bench without speaking. After a long time, he put his head on my shoulder. And I thought, this is what cathedrals must feel like when the light finally hits the rose window. Then January ended and he went back to Philadelphia. I stayed behind with a shoulder that still smelled like his shampoo and the conviction that some people are only loaned to you. He married Adrian 2 years ago. I knew because I still Googled him when I was drunk, which was less often than it used to be, but more often than I admitted. Adrian was a cardiologist with kind eyes and a laugh you could hear across rooms. They looked happy in photographs. Hated that I checked. Now here we were, separated by one locked adjoining door and 23 floors of vertigo. I let myself into 2310. The suite was all cool grays and teak, floor-to-ceiling windows looking over the bay.
Right.
I set my garment bag on the luggage rack and immediately heard the faint clink of ice against glass next door, then the low murmur of a phone call. Then silence. I showered, changed into the navy suit I'd bought because the salesman said it made me look quietly authoritative, and tried to pretend my pulse was normal. At 7:12 p.m. the piano started, not recorded live. Someone next door was playing. The Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the one he used to play when he thought no one was listening. The same wrong note in the 10th bar. He'd never fixed because he said it sounded like a heartbeat skipping. I stood in the middle of my room with shampoo still dripping from my hair and felt 19 again, helpless and ravenous. I ordered room service I didn't eat. I opened my Keynote slides and stared at renderings of a performing arts center in Jakarta until the lines blurred. At some point the piano stopped and I hated the silence more than the music. I slept in fits, dreaming of practice rooms and locked doors and the smell of rosin. Morning came too soon. I knotted my tie 3 times because my hands wouldn't cooperate. When I stepped into the corridor, Elliot was already there, leaning against the wall checking email. He was wearing charcoal today. We matched, which felt like the universe laughing in surround sound. "Morning," he said. "Morning." The elevator ride down was 23 floors of almost unbearable quiet. His cologne was different, something cedar and dangerously expensive. But underneath it, I could still find the boy who used to smell like the inside of a piano. In the lobby, he paused. "I'm on at 9:30. "You 8:45, he nodded. "I'll try not to applaud too loudly when you bring the house down." Said it lightly, but something in his face wasn't light at all. I wanted to ask if Adrian knew he still played that Nocturne. I wanted to ask why he'd looked at me in the corridor like he was drowning. Instead, I said, "See you on stage, Way," and walked away before I could do something unforgivable, like reach for his hand. The keynote went well. They laughed in the right places. The Arts Center rendering got the gasp I'd spent 8 months earning. When I stepped off stage, Elliot was waiting in the wings, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't translate. "You were always good at making people fall in love with buildings," he said quietly. My heart executed a perfect triple axel into my throat. Before I could answer, someone called his name an organizer with a clipboard and no sense of timing. He touched my sleeve, just 2 fingers against the cuff of my jacket, and then he was gone. That night the conference held its gala on the rooftop. I stood by the railing, pretending to admire the skyline while actually tracking the reflection of him in the glass. He was talking to a woman in emerald silk, smiling the polite public smile that had never been for me. I was considering a 3rd whiskey when the string quartet began the slow movement of Beethoven's Opus 132. The one he used to say sounded like healing and heartbreak having tea together. He appeared beside me without a word. We listened until the final cadence dissolved into city noise. "Still your favorite?" I asked. "Some things calcify," he said. "Others just wait." I turned to look at him. Really look. The years had been kind in the way that matters and cruel in the way that shows. Tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the faintest tension around his mouth. He looked like someone carrying something heavy in a very expensive suit. Elliot. "Leo, we said each other's names like passwords." He glanced around, no one was watching, and then reached out. Slowly enough that I could have stopped him. He didn't touch my face. He touched the knot of my tie, adjusting it a fraction the way he used to when we were kids, and I never got it straight. "I miss you," he said so softly I felt it more than heard it. Every day for 10 years, I just got good at pretending I didn't. The rooftop tilted. Singapore tilted. The entire planet performed a graceful, drunken pirouette. I covered his hand with mine before he could pull away. I never learned how to pretend. I only learned how to leave rooms you were in. His breath hitched, somewhere behind us. The quartet began a waltz no one was dancing to. He said the connecting door locks from both sides. I said, I know. We stood there, 2 feet and 10 years and one thin wall apart. While the city glittered indifferently below us and the music played on, neither of us moved. Not yet. The conference is in Seattle this year, late October, the kind of gray that makes the Space Needle look like a pencil sketch. I'm 41, partner at a mid-sized firm in Portland. And I've spent the last 18 years trying to convince myself that I outgrew the person who once knew every freckle on Elias Hart's shoulders. I'm wrong. Apparently, he's sitting in the 4th row of the ballroom at the Washington State Convention Center, arms folded, wearing a charcoal suit that fits him the way memory fits me, perfectly, painfully. His hair is shorter now, threaded with early silver at the temples, and he's grown into the sharp cheekbones we all joked about in high school. There's a wedding band on his left hand that catches the projector light like a warning. I almost dropped my clicker. The keynote is titled, Regenerative Urbanism in the Age of Displacement. I wrote it months ago, back when the idea of seeing Elias again was still theoretical. Now every slide feels like a confession. I talk about housing as dignity, about how a doorway can be an act of mercy, about how cities forget people the way people forget each other. My voice cracks exactly once on the phrase the lives that happen inside them, because he's looking at me like he remembers the night I first said it. Drunk on cheap red wine in the back of his mom's minivan sophomore year. Rain drumming on the roof while we tried and failed not to fall in love. The room applauds. People want cards, partnerships, site visits. I nod and smile and pretend I'm not cataloging the new lines around his eyes. When the crowd thins, he's waiting by the exit, hands in his pockets like he's 16 again and nervous. Jesus, Cam, he says. That was you. All of it. I managed something that might pass for a laugh. Still overly earnest about windows and empathy, I guess. Smiles, and it's the same crooked thing that used to unravel me in the high school parking lot. You made half the room cry. I checked occupational hazard. We stand there while stragglers file past. He smells like cedar and the same laundry detergent his mom used to buy. Some details refuse to die? You in town through tomorrow? He asks. Keynote was the main event. Flying out noon. There's a gala thing tomorrow night. Black tie, terrible food, open bar. I'm dragging my husband. Says the word husband like he's testing its weight. Come, please. One drink. We can pretend we're civilized adults who didn't once know each other biblically in a 1998 Honda Civic. Oh, I should say no. I say, maybe. He nods like he expected nothing more, nothing less. Offer stands. He walks away, and I watch the space he leaves behind like it's a blueprint I still don't know how to read. I go to the gala anyway. Of course I do. The ballroom at the Fairmont Olympic is all chandeliers and old money. I'm wearing the only tux I own, the one I bought for my sister's wedding, and have worn maybe 4 times since. I look like a man who has his life together. I order a bourbon I don't taste and scan the room the way architects scan elevations, looking for flaws. For load-bearing truths, Elias is at table 12 with a man I recognize from Instagram before I recognize him in real life. Mateo Alvarez Hart, emergency medicine, smiles like sunlight. He's shorter than Elias, compact, dark-haired, wearing a midnight blue tux that makes him look like he stepped out of someone else's better life. When Elias leans in to say something against his ear, Mateo laughs and touches Elias's wrist with the absent confidence. Of 8 years of marriage, I hate how easy they make it look. I'm debating Irish goodbye when Elias appears beside me at the bar. Thought. That was you brooding in the corner, he says. Very on brand. I don't brood. I contemplate negative space. Sure, he orders a mezcal Negroni and turns so we're shoulder to shoulder, both facing the room. Mateo's talking shop with some trauma surgeons. I escaped while I could. I glance over. Mateo is gesturing animatedly, surrounded by people who hang on his every word. He looks like the kind of person who saves lives before breakfast. He seems good. I say. The understatement of the decade? He is. He's the best person I know. Slias swirls his drink. He also knows who you are. I mean, not details. Just that there was a Cameron before there was a Mateo. He told me to come find you. Said hi, actually. I choke on my bourbon. Yeah, Elias says, grinning. He's annoyingly secure. We're quiet for a minute. The kind of quiet that used to fit us like a glove. I Googled you, he admits. After I saw your name on the speaker list, your firm's doing that mixed-use project on Alberta, the one with the rooftop orchards. You hate rooftops. Hate inaccessible rooftops. Yours have community access stairs. I noticed. Of course he did. I kept the postcard, he says suddenly. What postcard? The one you sent from grad school. Rome, you wrote. The light here is unforgiving, and still nobody flinches. I stuck it in my sketchbook. It's still there. I close my eyes for a second. When I open them, he's looking at me like he's trying to solve a problem with no clean answer. Elias. I'm not asking for anything, he says quickly. I swear. I'm happy. We're happy. I saw you up there yesterday talking about lives inside buildings, and I kept thinking about all the rooms we never got to share. The apartments we never picked out. The dog we never adopted. The fights we never had because we were too young to know how to have them. I just needed to say it out loud. Once, so it's not still rattling around in here. He taps his chest. Once. Precise. I want to touch him. I want to shove him away. I want to ask if he remembers the night he told me he wasn't gay, just in love with me like that was a distinction that made sense at 17. I want to ask if Mateo knows he still says my name in his sleep sometimes. I want to ask if forgiveness is a structure we can retrofit, or if some things are demolition only. Instead, I say, I kept your sketch of the treehouse. He exhales like I've punched him, the one you drew on a napkin at Denny's, the one with the skylight shaped like a leaf. I still have it. In a box. With other things I can't throw away, he looks at me for a long time. I'm glad you're okay, Cam, he says finally. I'm glad you built things that matter. I'm glad you didn't let us ruin you. You didn't ruin me, I tell him. You just left the foundation cracked. I learned to build around it. Someone calls his name across the room. Mateo, waving him over for a photo. Elias lifts a hand in acknowledgement but doesn't move yet. Dance with me, he says. It isn't a question. Here. There's a balcony. Less people. One song. Then we go back to being adults with mortgages and husbands and lives that don't overlap anymore. I should say no, I follow him outside. The balcony overlooks Elliott Bay, black water and fairy lights. The string quartet inside is playing something slow and minor. He puts one hand on my shoulder, the other at my waist, and we move like people who still remember the choreography of Almost. I miss you, he says against my ear. So quietly I could pretend I didn't hear it. I know, I whisper back. Me too. The song ends. We don't let go right away. Eventually he steps back. His eyes are wet, but he's smiling, small and real. Thank you, he says. For the dance, for the buildings. For not hating me? I never hated you, I tell him. I just loved you too well for too long. He nods once. Like that's the period at the end of a sentence we've both been carrying for 18 years. Inside, Mateo is watching the balcony doors. When Elias walks back in, Mateo opens his arms without hesitation. Elias fits there like he was carved for it. I stay outside until the cold seeps through my tux. Then I go upstairs, order a 4 a.m. wake-up call, and sit on the edge of the hotel bed holding the napkin sketch I brought for reasons I refuse to examine. In my briefcase, the treehouse still has our initials carved under the skylight. Some structures, it turns out. Were never meant to be demolished. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to live in them anyway. The gala was held in the old Palmer House ballroom. All gold leaf and crystal chandeliers that made everyone look slightly more beautiful than they had any right to be. I was 31, wearing a tux that cost more than my first car. And I still felt like the scholarship kid who'd wandered into the wrong universe. I'd come back to Chicago for the 10-year reunion of St. Ignatius Prep, though no one called it a reunion. They called it an alumni celebration of continued excellence, which was code for rich Catholics drinking in a room that smelled like money and beeswax. I saw Elias before he saw me. He was standing near the bar, laughing at something someone said, head thrown back exactly the way he used to when we were 17 and sneaking out of study hall to smoke on the roof of the gym. The laugh hadn't changed. The man had broader shoulders, the kind of effortless posture that comes from years of assurance I never quite managed, and on his left hand, a platinum band that caught the light every time he moved. Elias Whitmore. The name still tasted like copper in my mouth. He turned, scanning the room out of habit, and his eyes landed on me. For a second, the polite smile froze, then widened into something real. He excused himself from the cluster of hedge fund brothers and crossed the marble floor like he was walking toward something inevitable. "Noah," he said when he reached me, voice low like we were still whispering in the back row of Latin class. "You came. I almost didn't. I'm glad you did." He smelled the same. Cedar and something faintly citrus. I hated that, I noticed. We stood there, 2 feet apart, a decade collapsing between us like a bad magic trick. I wanted to ask 1,000 things at once, and managed none of them. "You look good," he said finally. "You look married." The words came out sharper than I intended. His smile flickered, but didn't break. "Yeah, 2 years now. Caleb's around here somewhere, probably charming the Archbishop." I laughed despite myself. "You married someone named Caleb?" "Of course you did." He tilted his head, studying me the way he used to when he was trying to decide whether I was joking or bleeding. "Walk with me?" he asked. We ended up near the grand staircase, half hidden by a potted palm that probably cost more than my rent. The noise of the room faded behind us. "I read your book," he said quietly. "The one about the houses that remember. I recognized every building you wrote about. You still draw the way you used to, like you're trying to hold the world still long enough to understand it." I swallowed. "You still read everything I publish." I never stopped. The air felt too small suddenly. I took a step back and my shoulders hit the wall. Elias didn't move closer, but he didn't move away either. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't owe me anything." "I do." He glanced over his shoulder, checking for listeners the way he used to check for hall monitors. I was a coward at 18. I let my father and the firm and the idea of what a Whitmore was supposed to be decide everything for me. I let you think it was about you not being enough, when the truth was, I wasn't brave enough to want you out loud. I stared at him. 10 years of careful scar tissue ripped open in one sentence. "You're saying this now?" My voice cracked. "You're wearing a wedding ring, Elias." "I know." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I'm not asking you to God, Noah. I'm not here to blow up my life or yours. When I saw your name on the guest list, something in me refused to let this night pass without telling you the truth. I loved you. I've never stopped loving the version of you that existed when we were kids. And I've spent a decade being grateful that the first time I fell in love, it was with someone who deserved it." My chest hurt in a way that felt permanent. "And Caleb?" I asked. "Caleb is..." He searched for the word. "He's home. He's the life I built when I thought the one I wanted was impossible. I love him. That's real. But it doesn't cancel you out." It never did. Someone laughed too loudly behind us. I closed my eyes for a second. "I used to masturbate thinking about you," I said, crude and sudden, because cruelty was easier than tenderness. "Senior year. Every night after you kissed me behind the boathouse, and then pretended it never happened the next day at school, I hated you for making me want something I couldn't have." His face went very still. "I know," he said quietly. I hated myself more. We stood in silence long enough for a string quartet to start somewhere in the ballroom. "I should go," I said. "Please don't." He reached out, fingers brushing my wrist, not holding, just touching. "Will you have breakfast with me tomorrow?" "Just breakfast. Caleb flies out at noon for Tokyo. I'll be alone in the city until Tuesday. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I want to know who you became when I wasn't looking." I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect the brittle peace I'd built out of distance and deadlines and men who never asked me to stay. Instead, I heard myself say, 9 o'clock. The bitchy little cafe on Wabash that only sells one kind of coffee. He smiled like I'd handed him absolution. I'll be there. I walked away before I could change my mind. Later, much later, after too much bourbon and not enough courage, I stood on the balcony of my hotel room overlooking Michigan Avenue. The city was loud even at 2 a.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. It's me. 14th floor. Room 1420. I'm not asking you to come. I just needed you to know the door isn't locked if you want to yell at me properly. Or talk. Or nothing. Whatever you need. I stared at the screen until it went dark. I didn't go, but I didn't delete the text either. The next morning, I was at the cafe at Bad Ansichertiefen, nursing a cortado that tasted like burnt regret. Elias walked in at 8:59 wearing jeans and a navy sweater in the same nervous half-smile he'd had the first time he asked me to the winter formal as friends. He slid into the seat across from me. Hi, he said. Hi. We ordered more coffee we didn't need. We talked about everything except the thing hovering between us. My first boyfriend in college who taught me I could be wanted. His engagement that almost wasn't because he kept dreaming about a boy with charcoal under his fingernails. We talked about the house I was designing in Lisbon that looked like it was growing out of a cliff. We talked about the pro-bono legal clinic he ran for trans kids trying to change their documents. We did not talk about the way his knee brushed mine under the table and stayed there. At 11, he paid the bill, and we walked north along the river because neither of us was ready to say goodbye. The wind off the water was sharp enough to make my eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. I don't know what this is, I said finally, stopping beneath the Wabash Avenue Bridge. I don't know what you want. I want the version of this week where I don't lie to you again, he said. I want to take you to the Art Institute tomorrow because I remember you loved the Thorn miniature rooms and they have a new exhibit. I want to cook you the terrible carbonara I finally learned how to make without setting off the smoke alarm. I want to sit on opposite ends of a couch and talk until the sun comes up, the way we never got to when we were kids. He stopped, laughed once, pained. I want things I have no right to want, and Caleb. Caleb knows I'm having breakfast with an old friend. He trusts me. He's not wrong, too. Elias looked at me steadily. Nothing has to coming from this, Noah. Nothing physical. I'm not going to cheat on my husband. But I'm also done pretending you're just someone I used to know. I believed him. That was the worst part. We spent the next 4 days like that, suspended between what was and what might have been. Museums and dinners and long walks where we never quite held hands, but never quite stopped touching either. A shoulder brush. A hand at the small of my back guiding me through a crowd. The press of his thigh against mine in the dark of a movie theater watching a restoration of Call Me by Your Name that felt like a private joke from a cruel god. On the last night we ended up back at the Palmer House. In the same ballroom, emptied of chandeliers and pretense. The cleaning crew had left one light on. We stood in the middle of the dance floor where teenagers in rented tuxes had once swayed to vitamin C. I leave tomorrow. He said, I know. He took one step closer. I will never regret this week, even if it's all we get. I wanted to kiss him so badly my teeth ached. Instead, I reached up and straightened the collar of his shirt, fingers lingering at the hollow of his throat. You were my first love, I said. You'll always be my first love. That's not nothing. No, he whispered. It's not nothing. We didn't kiss. We stood there until security found us and gently asked us to leave. In the elevator down, he leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. Tell Caleb he's lucky, I said to Elias. Opened his eyes and looked at me with something ancient and tender. He knows. At the revolving door, he hugged me long, hard, the kind of hug that leaves bruises in all the right places. Then he walked out into the cold Chicago morning without looking back. I watched until he disappeared into the crowd. 6 months later, a package arrived at my office in Lisbon. Inside was a single Thorn miniature Rumen exact replica of the library at St. Ignatius, where we used to hide between the stacks. On the tiny desk sat two even tinier boys, made of painted lead. Heads bent over the same book. There was no note. There didn't need to be. Some doors once opened, never really close again. They just wait patiently for the next person brave enough to walk through. The terrace was too quiet after Elias left. The city below us kept moving, indifferent, while I stood frozen with a half-empty wine glass, staring at the door he'd disappeared through. "I'm going back inside," he'd said. "Liam will be wondering where I am. But if you want to talk you need anything, I'm in 1912. They do a decent espresso this late. Order whatever you want." Then he was gone, and the night felt suddenly colder. I didn't follow. Not yet. I stayed out there until the wind cut through my shirt and my fingers went numb around the stem of the glass. Until I'd replayed every second of the last 24 hours and still couldn't decide if I was allowed to want this again. Eventually, I went to my own room, 1914. 2 doors down from his and ordered coffee I didn't drink. I opened my laptop instead and did the thing I swore I wouldn't do. I looked him up. Elias Ward's studio. Minimalist residential work, mostly in the Pacific Northwest. Cedar and glass and light. Houses that looked like they were listening to the trees around them. There was an interview from 2 years ago where he talked about designing for quiet joy. I read it 3 times. I recognized the cadence of his sentences, the way you recognize someone's handwriting. On an envelope before you even see the name. I didn't sleep. At 6:47 a.m., I stood in front of the connecting door between 1914 and 1912. I'd walked past it 17 times since check-in, always with my heart in my throat. I raised my fist, lowered it, raised it again. In the end, I couldn't knock. Instead, I went down to the gym and ran until my legs shook. And the only thing in my head was the sound of my own breathing. When I got back, towel around my neck, there was a text waiting. "Elias, 7:12 a.m., breakfast downstairs at 8 if you're up. Liam will be there. No agenda, just food." I thought I'd ask. I stared at it so long the screen went dark. At 7:58. I walked into the restaurant in jeans and the least wrinkled shirt I owned. They were already at a table by the window, Elias in a charcoal sweater, Liam in a navy peacoat, the two of them leaning close over Liam's phone, laughing at something I couldn't see. When Elias looked up and saw me, his whole face changed, softened, like someone had turned a light on inside him. "You came," he said, as if my presence were a gift he hadn't dared unwrap. "I came." I answered and sat down opposite them. Liam reached across the table right away. Easy smile, firm handshake. "Noah, right? I've heard absolutely nothing about you for the last 15 years, which means I've heard everything." He grinned at Elias, who flushed pink and muttered Liam under his breath. I liked Liam immediately. There was no possession in the way he touched Elias's shoulder, no performance. Just affection worn soft at the edges from daily use, so Liam said. Buttering a croissant like this was the most normal morning in the world. "Elias tells me you two knew each other at St. Catherine's, that you used to build those ridiculous blanket forts in the common room and argue about whether Mies van der Rohe was a genius or a tyrant, among other things." I said carefully. He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. He also told me he spent senior year being a coward, that he's regretted it ever since. Liam glanced at Elias, something gentle passing between them. "I'm glad you're here, Noah. Really? Second acts are rare. Don't waste them being polite." Elias made a strangled noise. "Liam, for God's sake." "What?" "I'm efficient." Liam checked his watch. "Speaking of, we've got a panel on adaptive reuse at 9. He stood, bent to kiss Elias's temple, then offered me his hand again. "See you around, Noah? Or don't? Entirely up to you, two dinosaurs." He left with a wave and the faint scent of cedar. Elias and I sat in the wake of his absence, coffee cooling between us. I couldn't sleep, I admitted. Me neither. Elias traced the rim of his cup. "I kept thinking about what you said on the terrace. About whether we get to be the people we were supposed to be. or if we just keep punishing ourselves for the people we were. I looked at him, then really looked. The boy I'd loved at 17 was still there in the set of his mouth, the way he pushed his hair back when he was nervous. But there were new lines too, earned ones. A decade of life that didn't include me. I want to try, I said. My voice cracked on the last word. But I need you to know I'm terrified. I spent 10 years convincing myself I was over you. I don't think I ever was. So if we do this, if I let myself want you again, need to know going in that it might wreck me. Elias reached across the table and took my hand. His fingers were warm, calloused from drawing, from years of holding pencils and tracing lines that became homes. I'm terrified too, he said quietly. I have a life I love. A husband who knows every corner of me and still chooses me every day. But there's this space. He pressed his free hand to his chest, right over his heart. There's this space that's been waiting for you since we were 17. I thought it would close up eventually. It never did. He squeezed my hand once, deliberate. I'm not asking you to be a secret, Noah. I'm not asking you to be less than everything. I'm asking if we can figure out what more looks like. Slowly. Honestly. With Liam in the room? Because he deserves that. And because I hope you'll love him too. Once you know him, I laughed, a ragged sound. You always did make the impossible sound. Reasonable only with you. We sat there until the waiter refilled our coffee twice and the sun climbed, high enough to turn the windows gold. Neither of us let go of the other's hand. Eventually, Elias said, I have a site visit this afternoon up in Marin. Come with me. No expectations. Just, come see what I do now. Let me show you the man I became when you weren't looking. I looked at our joined hands. At the faint white scar across his knuckles, I'd given him the night we tried to build a treehouse, and he fell through the floorboards laughing. Okay, I said. He smiled, then the same crooked smile that used to make my chest cave in and, for the first time in 10 years. The space inside me that had been waiting for him felt a little less hollow. We left the restaurant together. Not running, not hiding. Just two men walking side by side into whatever came next, carrying the past gently between us, like something fragile and priceless that had finally been allowed to see daylight again. The hotel bar is quiet at 10:30 on a Thursday morning, the kind of hush that only exists in places that are meant to be loud at night. Alina sits across from me at a small marble table, her fingers wrapped around a cup of black coffee she hasn't tasted yet. She's wearing a navy blazer and the same silver watch she had in college, the one her grandmother gave her the week before she died. I notice it the way you notice a scar you didn't know someone had. I haven't seen her in 19 years. She looks up and smiles, small and careful, like she's afraid the expression might break something. Hey, Liv. The sound of my name in her mouth is a physical thing. It lands on my sternum and spreads outward, warm and dangerous. Hey, I manage. We ordered coffee because neither of us trusts ourselves with anything stronger. Not yet, she speaks first. I practiced what I would say to you for months. On planes, in the shower, in the middle of client dinners, and now I'm just blank. I laugh, because if I don't, I might cry. Same, I had a whole speech. It started with you look exactly the same, and ended with me apologizing for disappearing like a coward. You don't owe me an apology, she says quickly. Too quickly, I do? I insist. I ghosted you. After everything, after I stopped because the memory is suddenly too sharp, the night before graduation. Her mouth on my collarbone, the way she whispered my name like it was a secret she'd been keeping since freshman year. The next morning, I was gone. New city, new phone number. New life where I pretended I was someone who had never been in love with her best friend. Alina looks down at her coffee. I looked for you, you know. For years. Your mom wouldn't tell me where you went. You said you needed space. I hated her for that. I asked her not to tell anyone. My voice is barely above a whisper. I was scared. Of what? Of wanting you so much it felt like drowning. She exhales, shaky. God, Liv. The silence stretches, thick and humming. I reach across the table without thinking and cover her hand with mine. She flips hers over immediately, laces our fingers like it's muscle memory. Her palm is warm. Her wedding ring presses cold against my skin. We both pretend not to notice it. I'm not going to vanish this time, I say. I need you to know that. She nods, eyes glassy. I'm not asking you to blow up your life. I have a life too. Sarah and I were good. Really good. She's kind and steady, and she makes me laugh when I forget how. But sitting here with you feels like... She searches for the word. Like finding a song I thought I'd lost the melody to. I swallow hard. I know exactly what you mean. Shh. Sarah thinks I'm at a client breakfast downtown. I've got maybe 2 hours before she wonders. I've got until 1, I say. Come with me. Where? It's a surprise. We leave the hotel and walk 3 blocks to where I park the rental. The drive is quiet at first, both of us afraid to break whatever fragile thing is forming between us. I take us west, out of the city, past the suburbs, until the landscape opens up and the hills turn gold with October. 40 minutes later, we're standing in front of Pacific Crest Academy, the private high school we both attended on scholarship. The campus has changed, new science building, renovated theater, but the main quad is the same. Same pepper trees. Same cracked concrete benches where we used to sit and pretend to study while we talked about everything that mattered. Alina stops walking. You brought me here. You used to eat lunch under that tree, I say, pointing. The one with the low branches. You'd read Narutha out loud when you thought no one was listening. She laughs, startled. You heard me? Every single day. I sat 3 tables away pretending to care about AP Calc review packets while you murdered me with Spanish poetry. I thought you were straight, she says softly. I thought I was too. Turns out I was just terrified. We walk the perimeter of the quads slowly, like pilgrims. Past the theater where we both had leads in different shows and never spoke. Backstage because wanting each other felt too big for 17. Past the art building where I once left a sketch of her sleeping in her studio carrel, unsigned, too afraid to claim it. I was so angry at you, she says as we reach the edge of the soccer field. For years, I thought you rejected me because I wasn't enough, because I was too much. Both at the same time. I rejected myself. I correct. I thought if I stayed close to you, I'd ruin everything. Your future mine, the version of me my parents wanted. She turns to face me fully. The wind lifts her hair. And now? Now, I'm 38, and I've built a whole life that fits perfectly except for the space shaped exactly like you. Her eyes fill. Same. We sit on the bleachers overlooking the empty field. The sun is high and mercilessly kind. She tells me about meeting Sarah at a women's march in 2017, how it took 6 months of friendship before either of them admitted it was more. About the house they bought in Oakland with the lemon tree in the back. About the dog they adopted who still sleeps between them like a referee. I tell her about Mara, my wife. How we met doing disaster relief architecture in Puerto Rico after Maria. How she held my hand on a red-eye flight while I cried about things I'd never told anyone. How we got married on a rooftop in Brooklyn with 30 people and a string quartet playing Radiohead. I love her, I say. I'm not confused about that. I love Sarah, Elena echoes. But this, I gesture between us, helpless. This is something else. It's the thing we never got to finish, she says. We sit in silence for a long time. Somewhere on campus a bell rings. Students laughing as they spill out of classrooms. The sound is distant, like it's happening underwater. Eventually she checks her phone. I have to go, I know. In the car on the way back, she reaches over and rests her hand on my thigh. High enough that it could be innocent but isn't. I cover it with mine. Neither of us speaks. When I pull up outside her hotel, she doesn't move to get out right away. I don't know what we do with this, she says. We don't have to know yet, I tell her. We just have to not disappear again. She leans across the console and kisses me. Soft, deliberate, the kind of kiss that says, I remember everything. When she pulls back, her lipstick is smudged and her eyes are fierce. Text me when you land tomorrow, she says. I will. She gets out, shuts the door, and walks away without looking back. I watch until she disappears into the lobby. Then I sit in the car for a long time, both hands gripping the wheel, feeling the shape of a life I thought I'd buried 19 years ago rise up inside my chest like it never left. I don't have answers. I have a wife I love, and a marriage I believe in, and a heart that apparently still belongs, in some deep and irreversible way. To the girl who used to read poetry under a pepper tree, the real world is waiting. But for the first time in almost 2 decades, I'm not running from it. My high school crush booked the table next to mine at a writer's retreat in Vermont, and it changed my life forever. Just not in the way I once imagined. Her name was Lena Park. We were 17 when we met in AP Literature. Both of us quiet, both of us secretly writing novels in the margins of our notebooks. She had long black hair she kept twisted with a pencil and a way of looking at you like she already knew the last line of your story. I was in love with her the way only a teenager can be, catastrophically, silently, with no idea what to do with the feeling. We read each other's short stories. We stayed late in the library, arguing about whether endings should be earned or gifted. Once, she brushed my hand, reaching for the same copy of The Remains of the Day, and I didn't sleep for 2 days. Then graduation came. She got into the Iowa Writers' Workshop. I took the SAFE scholarship at a state school 2,000 miles away. We promised to write. We wrote twice, then nothing. Life is very good at swallowing people whole. 15 years later, I was 32, newly divorced, and trying to finish a second novel that my editor kept calling promising but bloodless. I signed up for a small expensive retreat in the mountains because the website promised solitude and because I was desperate for anything that felt like forward motion. The first morning, I walked into the dining hall carrying coffee in dread, and there she was at the next table, hair still long, still twisted with what might have been the same pencil, reading a marked-up manuscript with the kind of concentration that used to make my chest hurt. She looked up. Our eyes met. The room did not tilt. The music did not swell. She simply said, "Eli," like she'd been expecting me all along. I managed something like, "Hello." She smiled the same half-smile I'd cataloged in yearbook photos and said, "Sit. We have 15 years to ruin or rescue." We did not fall into each other's arms. We did not confess undying love. We were adults who had learned the hard way that feelings are not plot coupons. Instead, we talked about craft, about agents, about how marriage can hollow you out if you let it. She was married to a composer named Adrian who wrote film scores and, from what I could gather, adored her in the steady, uncomplicated way I never could have at 17. That week, we took long walks between workshops. We read each other the new work we were terrified to show anyone else. She told me my dialogue had improved, but my endings still felt terrified of hope. I told her she'd learned how to write sex scenes without blushing, which made her laugh so hard, coffee came out her nose. On the last night, there was a bonfire. Someone brought bourbon. Adrian had FaceTimed earlier. He was in Prague scoring a war movie and told Lena to tell Eli, "I'm jealous he gets you in person this week." She repeated it without flinching, and something in me both hurt and settled. We stood a little apart from the others. The firelight moved across her face the way it used to move across the library tables. "I'm glad it's you," she said quietly. "What part of me?" "The part that stayed kind. The part that still believes stories should matter. I was afraid you'd become cynical. Was afraid you'd become perfect and untouchable." She laughed again, softer. "I'm neither. I'm just someone who missed her friend." The word friend landed between us like a stone dropped in still water. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing anyone had said to me in years. We exchanged real numbers this time, not the old student emails that had gone dark. We promised nothing dramatic, just that we would not disappear again. And we didn't. For the next year, we became constants in each other's inboxes. Voice notes at 2 a.m. when a chapter wouldn't end. Manuscripts swapped with brutal, loving notes in the margins. She and Adrian came to my city for a concert. I flew to theirs when my divorce was final, and I needed somewhere that wasn't my empty apartment. Adrian made risotto and asked smart questions about structure. I liked him so much it should have been humiliating. But it wasn't. It was relief. 18 months after the retreat, Lena's second novel came out to the kind of reviews that make a career. Mine limped into the world 6 months later and did better than I deserved. We scheduled a joint reading in a bookstore in Denver because it was roughly halfway between us. Afterward, in the green room that smelled of coffee and old paper, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a single sheet, the first page of the novel she was writing now. The dedication read, "For Ela, who taught me that some loves are load-bearing walls. You hold the whole house up without anyone noticing until they do." She was watching me with that same steady gaze from high school, only now it carried the weight of everything we'd survived, separately, and were choosing to share. "I don't want to sleep with you," she said, blunt as ever. "I know," I said. "I don't want that either." "Not anymore. What do you want?" "To keep you. However you come." She nodded once, like we'd just agreed on a difficult revision. Then she hugged me, fierce and certain. I felt her wedding ring press into my back, and it did not feel like an obstacle. It felt like part of the architecture. 5 years after the retreat, Adrian and Lena adopted a 9-year-old girl named Juno, who loved stories about dragons and refused to eat anything orange. I became Uncle Eli, who sent elaborate care packages of notebooks and fountain pens. I married a children's librarian named Mara, who thinks Lena is one of the funniest people alive, and who understands that some friendships are marriages, of a different kind, sometimes. The 4 of us meet in the middle some city, none of us live. In the end, we rent a house for a long weekend. We cook terrible meals and read one another the things we're working on. Juno builds blanket forts and demands we all sit inside them to listen. In those moments, with dragon drawings taped to the wall and Lena's laughter echoing off rental house walls, I understand that the greatest love story I will ever live is not the one I imagined at 17. It is this. 2 scared kids who lost each other and then, against every statistic, chose to find their way back not to the original shape, but to something sturdier, something that could hold marriages, children, separate lives, still have room. Sometimes love is not the fire that consumes. Sometimes it is the quiet beam running through the center of the ebb, a house that keeps the roof from falling in long after everyone has forgotten it's there. My high school. Crush sat down at the table next to mine in Vermont, and she turned out to be the love of my life, just not the version 17-year-old me was praying for, and that, I've learned, is the most beautiful kind of ending there is.